Hello, welcome to Jewish Stories for Kids on KabbalahWisdom.org. This week is the week of Brieshis. Now, we know one of the first mitzvahs Hashem gave us is, God forbid, never to kill, but likewise to save a life, as the Gemara says, like you saved the whole world, because every person is as valuable as the whole world. This is a story about a little boy whose life was saved by a soldier. And this is how the story goes. In Europe, there was a couple that they couldn't have children. So they came to Rabbi Yisrael of Koznitz, the Maggid of Koznitz, who was a great tzaddik. They asked him for a bracha. And he gave a bracha, and they had a child. But the child became very, very ill. And they went back to the tzaddik and they asked for another bracha. And he said, don't worry, everything will be okay. Meanwhile, things were getting worse and worse. And the mother was by the bed of the child every single moment. Well, you can't stay up forever. So one time she fell asleep. And as she opens her eyes, she sees a soldier standing by the bed with a bowl and a spoon and feeding her child. She got so frightened because she didn't know who it was. She screamed and the soldier ran away. But suddenly the child got better. It was a miracle. So they went to the Maggid to say, what should we do? Because they weren't sure who this guy was. What's the story? So the Maggid said, don't worry, everything's fine. And they went back and their son was fine. Everything was fine. Meanwhile, the Maggid had a shamash, like a helper, and he said to the shamash, I want you to go to the grave in Koznitz, the cemetery, and there I want you to knock on the grave of a Jewish soldier and tell him I want him to come to me. And that's what he did. And suddenly a soldier appeared in the Maggid's room. The Maggid said to him, tell me, who made you into a children's doctor? And he said, well, let me tell you the story. I was a soldier. I was taken away, many of them unfortunately were taken away very young, and I didn't have any knowledge of Judaism, and I was exactly like the Russian peasants. And in those days the soldiers were very cruel, they didn't have a lot of discipline. And one day my buddies saw a Jew walking down the street and they decided to rob him. So they beat him up and they took his 75 rubles, but then they were afraid that he would go tell the officer, because the officer was in charge of the soldiers. And the officer had a lot of power, he could have killed them. So they decided to hang him on a tree. Well, that was too much for me. And I knew that I was a Jew and I wouldn't let this happen, so I went back and I cut the rope and I gave him 75 rubles that I had, but meanwhile, the other soldiers had gone, and they were there at the roll call, but I wasn't there. So they went looking for me. They saw me next to the tree, and the Jew wasn't there. So they realized that I had saved his life. And now they were afraid that I would tell on them, so they hung me up. And then they buried me in the cemetery in Koznitz. I came to heaven, and they said, let's look. In heaven they look, how many good deeds did you do? Well, I didn't have many good deeds. I was just a soldier with Russian peasants all my life. But then they saw this beautiful good deed that I had saved a Jew from death. And it says, whoever saves one person, like he saved the whole world. But they felt they needed more good deeds in order to get the great reward of heaven. So therefore, every once in a while, when there's a Jewish child in need, they send me down with some special soup, and that has a miraculous help. And in that way, I get to go into heaven. So this is the story. Thanks for watching.